The Philadelphia 76ers fall to a shorthanded Toronto Raptors team. Is it time to panic or is it too early to do so? Philadelphia 76ers are not looking too good. They don't have Joel Embiid and Paul George. We're going to break it down coming up.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on to Locked On 76ers. Kayla, Santiago alongside Keith Pompey each and every day as we are going to break this game down between the Raptors and the Philadelphia 76ers. And your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On 76ers daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. So make sure you go and check it out today. So the 76ers fall to a Toronto Raptors team that had no means of beating the 76ers on paper last night. You look at it right now, Tyrese Maxey looks a little bit out of sorts early on in the season. I know it's game 2. Keith, are you worried? Is it time to panic? What's going on with the Philadelphia 76ers?
You know what? I'm going to say it's not time to panic, but I'm just going to tell you, without Joel Embiid and without Paul George, the 76ers don't appear to be any good, right? So it's not time to panic just because you expect Joel and Paul to come back. But right now, the team is struggling. Here you look at it, the team is shooting 40.2%, 17 of 60 on three-pointers, right? And opposing teams are like basically scoring at will on them. So now, again, it's not time to panic, but they need to correct some things. They really do.
The defense is really nowhere to be found at this point. And I don't think it's time to panic either. It's really early in the season, but I can't lie and say that I'm not worried at this point. And I bring that up because throughout the season, we've been alluding to it. Joel Embiid, Paul George probably aren't going to play on back-to-back. So this is a rotation that you're going to see a lot throughout this season. I say that, but also my counterpoint goes to there's a lot of teams in this league that if they didn't have the two stars, they would look completely different. You look at the Bucks, who the Sixers played in game 1 of the season. If they don't got Dame, if they don't got Giannis, they look completely different. A lot of other teams too. Jalen Brunson and Cat, if they're off the Knicks, they look completely different. But with that being said, Tyrese Maxey is expected to be that star on the rise and possibly have the 76ers as his team for years to come. So I'm definitely a little bit worried. There's a lot of time. It's a long season. You can definitely figure things out, but you just look at so many different categories in last night's game. And one that sticks out to me, and it's something we touched on throughout this week, the personal foul trouble that these players are getting in. Andre Drummond, Kyle Lowry, and Tyrese Maxey all have 5 personal fouls in this game. That's something that you just can't have. It's sloppy. You're not sliding your feet. You're not getting back on defense. And one thing throughout training camp that Paul George and Nick Nurse did say was defense was their priority. And right now, Keith, they just don't look like they're on the same page. It's tough to really tell because they did practice with Paul George and they were able to have him in the system throughout the preseason. But without those two, this team doesn't even look like they have a chance to compete.
No, they don't. And the problem is, the difference is between, and you are right, if you take Dame Lillard and Giannis off of the Bucks, they would be a completely different team. But something tells me that that team would still beat the undermanned Toronto Raptors, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the thing that really scares me or concerns me. It's not time to panic. But see, the problem is when you have a Sixers team like this, so we look at the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm just going to compare them to the Milwaukee Bucks. So what you have is you have Joel Embiid, a max salary player. The same thing with Tyrese Maxey. The same thing with Paul George. Well, the Milwaukee Bucks, they got 2 max players, but then they have a lot of other guys who are making nice money. They're not making a max, but they're making a nice money. Whereas the Sixers, you have a bunch of minimum salary dudes who are basically specialists or role players, right? So now what the Sixers are doing is they're asking these guys to step up and help carry the team. They're not capable of doing that right now. So that's what we're seeing. Now, the thing is, it's just like they got to they got to figure something out. Kelly Oubre, he had a game high points tonight. But aside from that, guys who were supposed to be stepping up aren't, and you are right. I mean, they were on pace to foul out. I'm talking about early. We're talking about, you think about it, think about this. Drummond had 2 fouls in the first quarter. So did Yabusele, right? Then they picked KJ Martin in as the small ball center. He was ineffective. And then Adem Bona came in with 1:53 left in the first quarter. That's how, I mean, so you can't do that. Then you have Kyle Lowry. He almost fouled out. Caleb Martin was in foul trouble. I mean, you're right. This and it's not like this is the only game it happened. It happened the same way against Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. So they have problems, and you're right. Now, here's the one thing I will say this. When we saw them play against the Minnesota Timberwolves, they were in a funk too until Paul George had to take over in the second quarter. So they do have issues.
It's really concerning, I think, when you look at this team right now, because when you're talking about guys being in so much foul trouble, Adem Bona coming in at the first quarter, you're saying, okay, that's more like a preseason game. No, people, we're in the regular season. It is go time. It is no longer sit back. Okay, we have people coming in, getting experience. It's go time at this point. And I understand that the two stars are not playing in the game, but at the same time, Tyrese Maxey wants this to be his team for years to come. He's got to start acting like that. We're going to touch on that in the next segment before we get too ahead. But just looking at who the Raptors didn't have, it really makes me just think back to how this game was last night. No Quigley, no RJ Barrett, no Bruce Brown, no Kelly Olynyk. How did the Sixers not pull that off? I just don't understand it. You look at it and you say, okay, well, Nick Nurse is in a really tough spot right now because so many guys, whether the miscommunication is happening, there's no chemistry on the floor, especially defensively. KJ Martin had 2 points last night, 2 points, and he's somebody we talked about needing to step up, whether he's in the starting lineup or coming off the bench. And this worries me because even when Joel Embiid and Paul George are in the lineup, who do you go to when those guys need a rest? Now, I understand that Paul George and Joel Embiid can probably give you 30 piece at any given night, and Tyrese Maxey will probably play better when they're in the lineup. But we've seen year after year with the Philadelphia 76ers, they don't always have the best depth, and other teams they go against, especially in the postseason, they do. And right now, it doesn't look like any of these guys are really reliable, even when the two big stars do come back.
Nah, it doesn't. And it's making me think that they may even have to tweak the lineup again. So the thing is, the one thing that they did do is something that you and I talked about, where we felt like Kyle Lowry needed to be in the starting lineup. We also said that Caleb Martin probably needed to replace KJ Martin in the starting lineup, and they did that. But from what I saw today, in like as far as like defensively and stuff like that, and as far as the thing about it is being able to free Maxey up. I'm starting to think Kyle Lowry needs to stay in the starting lineup. The only problem is who's going to be the backup point guard. But I still think that he needs to stay in there because, as you're saying, is some of these guys need to step up, and they haven't stepped up at all. And I think that Caleb Martin, for what he did the first game, I felt like he brought more energy off the bench than he did in the starting lineup. And maybe because he kept staying and he was in foul trouble. But for whatever reason, it just seemed as if that he just couldn't match it. Now, he did end up with 11 points. I'll give him that. But early on, when they needed him, it was more or less he was too busy worrying about being a facilitator when they needed somebody to get buckets.
Yeah, nothing's clicking right now. I think that's easy to say. And I understand that a lot of these guys are probably like, well, Tyrese Maxey's the star on this team. Let's try to get him the ball or get it inside to Drummond. But at some point, you got to have that mindset as an NBA player to take over, especially when the two stars are out of the game. Nobody has that mindset right now. Kelly Oubre does, and we saw that a little bit last year. He's kind of still getting into that role. Nothing's clicking. There's no chemistry. And yes, will things probably get better when you put a superstar like Paul George or Joel Embiid back into the lineup? Probably, but the one guy that I'm looking at right now that I am a little bit concerned about in the second game of the season is the point guard. in Tyrese Maxey, shooting guard, point guard, wherever he needs to be for this team. He could be over the shooting guard, trying to get more points there if Kyle Lowry does end up in the starting lineup with him throughout some games. We're going to discuss that in just a moment here. So Tyrese Maxey, I love his energy. I love what he comes out with. I love the post-game quotes of him saying, I have to be better. It's on me. It's starting to sound a lot like Joel Embiid, though, and Joel answers post-game interviews and says, it's all about me. I got to be better, all this stuff. Tyrese Maxey really, really struggled last night. And it's once again one of the situations, Keith, where he says, I have to do everything. I have to be that guy. He goes 2 for 12 from beyond the arc, 6 for 23 field goal percentage. He just looks out of sorts too. And it is concerning because, yes, he can light it up at any moment, but he hasn't figured out how to really get other guys involved. He does have those 4 assists a night ago, but when Tyrese Maxey is out of sorts, there's definitely some concerns you want to raise with this team early on in the season.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And when we look at it, let's break it down. So through 2 games, Maxey is averaging 24.5 points on 27.7% shooting. He's also made just 4 of 21 3-pointers, right? Now, the crazy part is, like you said, he says the right things, but he was a little candid. And I think he's trying. I think he's pressing. He's saying he's not, but it's like he's getting out there. He's doing things, and the shots aren't falling. But it just seems like he's pressing a little bit. He's trying to do too much. Now, this is what he said after the game. He said, I have to refocus and make some shots, man. I'm getting some good looks, honestly. He said, like some shots that I will take every single day. But he keeps saying like a lot, but he says, but like in layups, my touch seems a little off right now. It's okay. I'm going to work on it. Now, the one thing is, he said, though, I think people know that I'm a pretty confident guy. I never lose confidence. So as long as Coach Nurse keeps believing in me and my teammates keep believing in me, he says, I'm going to keep being aggressive. Well, they need him to be aggressive, but it just seems like he might need to take a little bit off, right? And just instead of he's aggressive, but sometimes you can argue that he may be a little bit too aggressive. And that's what he's saying is my layups are off. Well, it seems like, they're hard, they're this, they're that. So I just feel like he just needs to relax, like just do chill mode. But again, he doesn't have the 2 guys with him, but he's only making 27.7% of his shots.
It's a tough situation because you look at Tyrese Maxey and you feel for the kid, right? You look at it and say, well, clearly there's a lot of pressure on him at this moment. And he can say all he wants that maybe he doesn't feel the pressure. He's there for the team. But at the end of the day, all those guys are looking at him as the main guy with those 2 other stars being out. And something else I want to touch on too, Maxey shot 3 for 7 in the first quarter and then went 3 for 16 the rest of the way. So the confidence needs to be brought up a notch. And I completely agree with you. I want him to play a little bit looser. I want him to go back out there and have some fun. There just seems so much tense and so much pressure on Tyrese Maxey right now. And listen, I completely understand why. I get it. And I do think that he's still the star on that team, especially when there's no Paul George and Joel Embiid. But at the same time, there is other guys. And I don't think, Keith, that this team is going to get better with this group until Tyrese Maxey plays a little bit more loose and then other guys can get involved. Because right now, nobody really knows where they need to be on the court. Everybody's playing tense. And you want to go out there. You want to be able to feel the chemistry with your team. Once again, it is only game 2. But I didn't expect this from Tyrese Maxey. I can say that. I thought coming out of the gate that he was going to be the guy scoring. He was going to be ready to go. He was in this moment last year when Joel was hurt. But right now, he just seems not like himself. And I hope that Nick Nurse continues to believe in him and gives him that confidence going forward.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And you said, look, it's only game 2. But let's face it, they lost to the Toronto Raptors without their 5 best players. No, I take that back. Scotty Barnes, their best players. They lost to the Toronto Raptors without their next 4 best players. That can't happen. That can't happen.
It can. It was almost like there was some preseason players out there just trying to play like they had nothing to lose. And I think that was the biggest thing with the Raptors. And I said this 2 nights ago, too, that the Raptors have nothing to lose at this point. They're coming in. They have a lot of guys not playing. They're going to play loose. They're going to play free. And that's exactly what happened. Now, the only good thing for the Philadelphia 76ers I can say is that they do play the Pacers on Sunday, and there's a lot of things that they definitely need to fix up. But at the same time, well, the Pacers weren't a fun team to watch in game 2 either. They fall to the New York Knicks. Biggest stat there, Pascal Siakam, only 12 points. Tyrese Halliburton, 0, none, nil, 0 points. So the Pacers might be coming into Sunday kind of with that same mindset of we've got to figure this out. So does Philadelphia. And at this point, this is a chance to kind of get back out there at Sunday at 3:30 p.m. But Tyrese Maxey, he's got to figure it out. And I think that I agree with you in the sense that him and Kyle Lowry should be on the court at the same time. What do you want to see from Tyrese? I know we want to see him play more loose, maybe not being too aggressive, but is there anything else, even on the defensive side or more on that offensive side as a leader, that you want to see from Tyrese that you think will help him going into the rest of the season with this core group without Paul George and Joel Embiid?
I just want to see him slow down a little bit. I mean, it looks like, he's been taking a lot of shots, We talked about that. And I know he has to. I know Nick Nurse wants him to be aggressive, but it just seems like he needs to slow down and just get in rhythm. I mean, like sometimes you're going 100 miles an hour and you're firing up shots and everything, but I just need him to be a little bit more fluid. He just seems to be pressing a little bit. He says he's not, but he just seems to be pressing. He's a fast guard. We know that he can get up and down the floor probably quicker than anyone else in the league. But to me, he just looks like he's pressing too much. So relax a little bit. Just relax.
Maybe put your shoulders back a little bit, take a deep breath, relax before you have to play basketball on Sunday and take on the Pacers, who also just fell to the Knicks last night, too, in a tough game for Indiana. But we're definitely going to touch on some players that, once again, need to step up. I know we sound like a broken record, but the Raptors had guys step up, and they didn't have 4 of their top players in the game. So the 76ers can do it. They just have to figure it out, and we'll see if they'll be able to on Sunday. All right, so a lot of different things happening in the game last night. KJ Martin, somebody that we've been talking about that needs to step up. He's 2 points. 2 points for KJ Martin. No 3-point attempts. It was really tough to see that a night ago. KJ Martin getting the start in game 1, coming off the bench in game 2. To me, that's just unacceptable. You have to have a bigger impact than that, especially in this current lineup.
Yeah, the thing is, KJ, if we're going to be real, KJ is a guy who is a role player, a guy who brings the energy, this and that. And at the same time, you're right, though. Like if you're being called upon, you got to produce at times. Now, again, I don't have a problem with him running to the rim, grabbing rebounds, making a lot of hustle plays and stuff like that. But the one thing I would like to see from him is they were telling us how much he's been working on that 3. Well, let's see what you can do. And I see him in pregame knocking them down. Him and Caleb Martin will after stick together after practice and will drain threes, right? You see that a lot, but you don't see it in the game at all. So he needs to step up. Another thing is, I would like to see a little bit more out of Eric Gordon too. I would. Now, but part of the problem is, Kayla, is like we're looking at these dudes and they're all like specialists. They're all, KJ is not on a minimum salary, but most of these guys we're talking about are, right? So they're specialists, but now we're realizing that maybe some of them aren't they can't step out of that role. They're great when you have Paul George and Embiid and Maxey, but it just looks like when 2 of the 3 stars are out, and you got to ask these guys to do more. They just can't right now.
And I think that's my biggest concern going into game 3 of the season. And I know we talked at the top of the show. Are you panicking? Are you not? No, not panicking. But again, there's going to be a ton of games where the Philadelphia 76ers don't have Joel Embiid and Paul George. So when you look at it, you say, okay, how many games can they realistically win? And I'm seeing a ton of people talk about this is why Joel Embiid is consistently in the MVP conversation, because they just look like such a different team, Paul George or not. If Joel Embiid is not on the floor, the Sixers just look all out of sorts. And then you look 19 bench points for the Philadelphia 76ers. Another category too, Keith, that I want to touch on. Raptors out-rebounded the 76ers 54-28. Just unacceptable. And a lot of that has to do with the no rim protector and Joel Embiid. But come on, guys, let's rebound without fouling and get something going here, because this is the reality of the situation and what you're going to have to deal with throughout the season. Those numbers can't happen, especially when you're going against a Raptors team that doesn't even have 4 of their main guys.
Exactly. That's the bad part. That's the bad part. That's the
bad. It is. It is. So the Philadelphia 76ers, they're looking to have game 3 against the Indiana Pacers. Clearly the Pacers, a really tough night against the New York Knicks last night as well. They fall in that contest. Halliburton, no points. How do you see this team matching up with Indiana, Keith? I'm excited for it because I think that the Pacers also just had a really bad game. Granted, it was against a much better team in the New York Knicks, but for the Pacers, this is also a contest that they're going to want to kind of get back into their groove in the win column.
You know, the worst thing that happened to the Sixers is that the Pacers lost, in my opinion. Ooh. Because what happens is if the Pacers were like 1 and they lost like close game or something like that, the Sixers could go in there and sneak in there, and the Pacers like, oh, it's just Tyrese Maxey and a bunch of role players. They're not going to be able to compete. But the fact that the Pacers got smacked around by the Knicks and Halliburton didn't score a single point, they're going to be fired up and ready to come out here and show that they're a better team. So the 76ers, I think they're going to lose this game, but they better be careful and hope that they don't get blown out. You know what I mean? So they're going to have to step up because, you know, the one thing that we talked about is, you know, rebounding. What was that is that's 1-2, that's effort. Now, again, Drummond was in foul trouble, so he couldn't do a lot that he wanted to. But to me, the 76ers better be careful because this team is awake now. They don't want to get embarrassed, and they're going to try to do whatever they can to impose their will on the Sixers. So the Sixers are going to have to come out and play, really play.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous. I'm excited. Hopefully Tyrese Maxey can kind of turn the coin here, get into his groove a little bit. Game 3 of the season, so you can kind of give him some slack right now. But if this continues, it's definitely going to raise a lot of questions with Tyrese Maxey kind of being the star on the floor at this point with no PG and no Joel Embiid. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely a little bit nervous. I think going back to the Raptors game too, the one thing how to describe that word is a little bit embarrassing, to be honest. It's a lack of effort out there, going out there knowing that you're playing a team that's down 4 of their main guys. To me, Keith, it almost looked like they knew that they were going in there to play without 4 of their main guys in the Raptors and said, oh, well, maybe this is an easy win for us, and just didn't go out there in full force. I don't know what's not clicking right now. In your mind, what do you feel like needs to click for them to win some games without the 2 stars on the court?
Man, I think the biggest problem first of all, they got to make shots. I mean, that's what it is. It's simple. You have to make shots. But secondly, I think defensively, they just got to be in the right position. I mean, but a lot of their offense is created off of their defense is created off of offensive miscues and the other team taking it the other way and then scoring points in the paint. Like on transition and everything. It's just, I don't know, like the Sixers need to do a better job of handling the ball. They also need to shoot better and they need to play better defense. So to me, it's hard to pinpoint one thing because it's just a lot going wrong right now. I mean, and the crazy part is the guy who's 38 years old, if you want to look at it, he's probably playing the best. Now, he was in foul trouble last night talking about Kyle Lowry, but he's probably playing the best on the team right now, which is crazy because a great player and a former six-time All-Star, but he's supposed to be the old guy. And he's like playing better than some of these young guys. So the Sixers have some problems right now that they need to address. But ball handling, I can't say which one is leads the pack. They need to work on their ball handling. They need to make shots, and they need to get some stops. I mean, it's all equal to me.
There's a whole list, right? At this point in the season, there's just a whole list that's hurting our brains that we need to think about of what is going wrong. Maybe a little bit of worry, some people panicking early on and overreacting. We're going to wait and see how it plays out. Now, I want to go through the Sixers schedule before we sign things off, just the next 3 games. Clearly, they play the Pacers on Sunday. Then you face Tobias Harris and the Pistons, and then you face the Grizzlies. That rounds out next week. So these are 3 games, Pacers, Pistons, and Grizzlies. How do you see the Sixers coming out of these next 3 games? You already think they're going to fall to the Pacers. Do you see them kind of being able to get back against the Pistons and the Grizzlies? How do you see them shaping out in these next 3 games?
I hope for them that Joel and Paul comes back against the Pistons, right? I hope for them they do. I still here's the crazy part. If I thought that they were going to beat the Toronto Raptors B team tonight. Like I thought they were going to beat the B team. They lost to the B team. So to me, if Joel and Paul don't come back, I think it could be another upset. Because my thing is we're looking at it as if Tobias Harris is going and Paul Reed are both going to be motivated. Now, can Paul Reed stop drumming? No, he can't. But Tobias, I just feel like after all the flack he got in Philly, the boos that he's going to receive, all this other stuff, that he's going to come out on fire. And I think the Sixers should win. I think they will win. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if they lost. You know what I mean? Because, again, they lost to I hate to say it, but they lost to Scotty Barnes and the Toronto Raptors B team.
That they did. They did. And it's tough to even speak that into words. And we thought that it was embarrassing that they lost to the B team. It's going to be even more embarrassing if this team loses to the Pistons and Tobias Harris. And all I want to say is I want to put a petition out there, and I might be the only person on planet Earth to think this. I don't think that Tobias Harris should be booed. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but Tobias Harris, it wasn't his fault that he got a max contract, right? This team decided to pay him. And let's be realistic. There's a lot of NBA players that get max contracts that probably don't really deserve it and aren't max players, but it's just the way of the league nowadays. Tobias Harris still gave everything he got. He wasn't great. And I will say that there was a lot of times where I was like, why do you have the ball in your hands? You can't even make a layup right now. But at the same time, he really loved Philadelphia. He goes down in the bubble. His head is bleeding. He comes up, even though the team's about to get swept. So Keith, are you expecting boos? Do you want to see him get booed? What is going to be the reality of the situation there against the Pistons?
I'm expecting boos. Do I want to see him get booed? No. I'm with you with Tobias. You know, the thing is, I feel like there probably was some unrealistic expectations put on him, but I also feel like there was times where he didn't get a chance to really show what he could do. You know, whether okay, we want you to be a role player. We want you to do this. We want you to, you know, get to the wing and stretch the floor when he really was really good in the pick and roll. The one thing that I will say about Tobias is that, you know, when he first came here, he couldn't guard me. Like I would give him 30. Nah, maybe not. But at the same time, he couldn't guard anyone, right? So, but by the time he left, he became a pretty good defender. There was times where he was like one of their better perimeter defenders, and he's a power forward, but he's out there. He was one of the better ones. So I feel like he did what he did. I'm with you. He didn't, it wasn't his fault that the 76ers paid him that much money. They gave the unrealistic expectations, but you can also argue that he wasn't utilized the right way. But so I feel like he should not be booed, but he is going to be booed.
He is. The Wells Fargo Center will be full of boos. Hey, at least he didn't sit out of training camp or anything like that and cause a bunch of drama. He kind of just did his thing and people didn't like him. But I know people in the comments are not going to like that opinion, but hey, I'm standing on it. I don't think Tobias Harris should get booed at the Wells Fargo Center. But nevertheless, the Philadelphia 76ers trying to get their first win of the season. They will take on the Indiana Pacers on Sunday at 3:30 p.m. Thank you all so much for tuning in with us on Locked On 76ers. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing Locked On 76ers Daily Newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with all new free Locked On 76ers newsletter. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Sixers back in action on Sunday, looking for their first win of the season.